The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held delegates from 417 different species, each one representing billions of lives across the stars. Light from 1,000 holographic displays painted the darkness in shades of blue and gold. This was the heart of galactic civilization, a place where wars ended and peace began. Kevin Holloway stood at the human delegation's podium, feeling very small and very alone. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair that had once been brown. 20 years he had spent in diplomatic service, learning alien languages and customs, believing that if he just worked hard enough, humanity would find its place among the stars. Today, that belief was dying. The Velethai speaker floated at the center of the chamber, its crystalline body catching light and scattering it into cold rainbows. The Veleth were ancient beings, older than most species in the galaxy. They had helped found the assembly 12,000 years ago, and they had guided it ever since. When a Veleth spoke, the galaxy listened. "The matter before us today concerns the species known as humanity," the High Speaker announced. Its voice had no warmth, no emotion. It was simply sound, pure and clear and terrible. They have been members of this assembly for only 50 years. In that time, they have expanded rapidly, claimed resources beyond their needs, and demonstrated a pattern of aggressive behavior that threatens galactic stability. Kevin wanted to object. He wanted to point out that humanity had followed every rule, signed every treaty, and bent over backward to prove themselves worthy of membership. But the speaking rights had been revoked from the human delegation 3 days ago. He could only watch and listen. "The proposal before us is simple," the High Speaker continued. "Humanity must be eliminated. Not contained, not restricted, eliminated. Every human being on every world must be destroyed. Their planets must be sterilized. Their history must be erased. It must be as if they never existed." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Kevin felt his legs weaken. He gripped the podium to keep himself standing. "This assembly does not take such measures lightly," the High Speaker said. "In 12,000 years, we have never declared total war on a member species, but humanity represents a unique threat. They breed too quickly. They adapt too easily. They form bonds with other species too readily. If they are allowed to continue, they will eventually dominate this galaxy. That cannot be permitted." The voting began. Kevin watched the holographic tally spin upward, each number representing a species that wanted his people dead. The Crothians voted yes. The Yethians voted yes. The small, peaceful Minari voted yes. The ancient Dreshkai, who had always seemed friendly to human diplomats, voted yes, every single one of them. 416 votes in favor. 0 against. 0 abstentions. The chamber fell silent. Kevin stared at the numbers, trying to understand what he was seeing. Unanimous. In 12,000 years, no vote had ever been unanimous. There were always dissenters, always those who argued for mercy or caution or simple self-interest. Not today. "The motion carries," the High Speaker announced. "Effective immediately, humanity is declared a threat to galactic peace. All member worlds are authorized to use terminal force. The combined fleets will assemble within 30 standard days. The human homeworld will be destroyed first, followed by their colonies. No survivors will be accepted. No surrender will be honored." Kevin found his voice. It came out rough and broken, but it came. "May I speak?" The High Speaker's crystalline form flickered. "You may ask one question. What crime have we committed? What did we do to deserve this?" The chamber waited. 417 species watched the human ambassador stand alone at his podium, asking why his children had to die. "You exist," the High Speaker said. "That is enough." Kevin nodded slowly. He had expected anger. He had expected accusations of specific crimes. The truth was somehow worse. Humanity was being killed, not for what it had done, but for what it might become. He gathered his documents carefully, placing each paper in his briefcase with steady hands. He straightened his tie. He smoothed his jacket. Around him, alien delegates were already discussing fleet movements and troop deployments. Speaking of genocide, as casually as they might discuss trade agreements, Kevin walked out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence that followed him. He did not look back. What none of them knew, what none of them could possibly suspect, was that Kevin Holloway had been transmitting from the moment he entered the chamber. A tiny device implanted behind his ear had captured every word, every vote, every face. The signal was bouncing through a network of hidden relays, crossing light years in seconds. Earth was listening. Kevin reached the docking bay where his shuttle waited. His aide, a young woman named Lucy Park, was already there. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she helped him board. "Ambassador," she whispered. "What do we do?" Kevin sat down in his seat and strapped himself in. Through the viewport, he could see the massive station that housed the Galactic Assembly, a structure larger than most moons. Somewhere inside, 400 species were planning the end of everything he loved. "We go home," he said quietly. "We tell them what happened. And then we do what humans have always done when the world tries to destroy them." Lucy looked at him, waiting. Kevin smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but there was something else in it, too. Something that the Velith and their ancient allies had never understood and never would. "We survive," he said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we survive. And then we make them regret this day for the rest of eternity." The shuttle launched, carrying the last human ambassador away from the chamber where his species had been sentenced to death. Behind him, the great machine of galactic civilization was already turning toward war, but humanity had been sentenced to death before. By ice ages and plagues, by wars and famines, by a universe that seemed designed to destroy them. Every time, they had refused to die. This time would be no different. The message reached Earth 6 hours later. Within minutes, it had spread to every human colony, every station, every ship. Billions of people learned that the galaxy wanted them dead. They learned that no one had spoken in their defense. They learned that they were utterly alone, and then they learned something else. They learned that their governments had known this day was coming for 40 years. They learned that preparations had been made in secret, plans that spanned generations. They learned that humanity had never truly trusted the galaxy's welcome. The great evacuation began. Cities emptied. Colonies went dark. Ships launched by the thousands. Heading for coordinates that had never appeared on any official map, Earth itself fell silent. Its billions vanishing as if they had never existed. When the alien fleets finally arrived, ready to begin the slaughter, they found only empty worlds and unanswered questions. The hunt for humanity had begun. But humanity was no longer there to be hunted. Admiral Yeneth of the Crotheon. Dominion had conquered 30 worlds in his long career. He had seen species fight to the last breath and species surrender at the first sign of battle. He had witnessed courage and cowardice in equal measure across the stars. Nothing in all those years had prepared him for what he found in the Sol system, nothing at all. His fleet had jumped in 3 days after the declaration of war, leading the advance force of 200,000 warships. Behind him, nearly 2 million more vessels from 80 different species were following, carrying enough weapons to reduce every planet in the system to molten slag. The humans had no significant military. Their technology was decades behind the galactic standard. Intelligence reports suggested they might have a few thousand ships capable of combat, most of them old and poorly armed. It should have been a simple matter of overwhelming force, but the Sol system was empty. Yeneth stood on the bridge of his flagship, his 4 eyes scanning the sensor displays with growing confusion. Earth hung in the viewport, a blue and green marble that should have been swarming with activity. Instead, it was dark. No lights on the night side. No communications traffic. No orbital stations. "Scan again," he ordered. His tactical officer obeyed, running the sensors over the entire system for the 5th time. "Nothing, Admiral. No human life signs anywhere. The planet appears to be completely abandoned." "That is not possible. There were 9 billion humans on that world 3 days ago." "Yes, Admiral. They are not there now." Yeneth ordered landing parties to investigate. Thousands of soldiers descended on Earth, spreading out across the continents with weapons ready and sensors active. They found cities intact, but empty. Food still in kitchens. Vehicles parked in streets. Personal belongings scattered as if people had simply walked away in the middle of their daily lives. But no bodies. Not a single human corpse anywhere on the planet. The reports came in from Mars. From the lunar colonies, from the stations in the outer system. All the same. Everything abandoned. Everyone gone. Yeneth had seen species flee before. Refugees packed into whatever ships they could find, scrambling to escape with whatever they could carry. It was always messy, always chaotic, always left signs behind. This was different. This was organized. This was planned. Where did they go? His second-in-command asked. Yeneth had no answer. They searched for 2 weeks. Every corner of the solar system was examined. Probes were sent to nearby star systems. Long-range sensors swept the void for any sign of fleeing ships. Nothing. 9 billion people had vanished without a trace. It was as if humanity had never existed at all. On the 14th day, every communication channel in the fleet activated simultaneously. A human woman appeared on every screen, her image crystal clear despite coming from nowhere anyone could detect. She was middle-aged, perhaps 50 or 60, with gray streaks in her dark hair and calm brown eyes. She wore simple civilian clothes. She carried no weapons. "My name is Patricia Dunn," she said. "I am the elected representative of the human race. I speak for every man, woman, and child who once lived in the Sol system." Yeneth leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. Around him, his bridge crew watched in stunned silence. "You came to our home to kill us," Patricia continued. "You found it empty. Now you are wondering where we went. You are searching your sensors and scanning your databases and asking yourselves how 9 billion people disappeared in 3 days." She smiled. It was a gentle smile, almost friendly, but something in her eyes made Yeneth's scales tighten against his body. "The answer is simple. We went everywhere." The transmission ended. Across the fleet, officers looked at each other in confusion. Everywhere? What did that mean? Yeneth was about to order an analysis of the signal when new reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Reports that made no sense. Reports that should have been impossible. On the Crothian homeworld, 3 humans had walked into the Capitol building and requested an audience with the planetary governor. They had been living in the city for 15 years, passing as a mixed-species family. They had jobs and friends and neighbors who had never suspected anything. On Velith Prime, a human had revealed himself during a government broadcast, calmly explaining that he had worked in their intelligence service for 20 years and had access to every classified database they possessed. On the Yethian, the trading world of Nexus Station, over 10,000 humans had simultaneously removed their disguises in the central marketplace, revealing themselves to the shocked crowds around them. Similar reports came from every corner of the galaxy. Humans on agricultural worlds, humans in military installations, humans in hospitals and schools and factories, humans who had lived among alien species for decades, who had married and had children and built lives that no one had ever questioned, 2 billion of them. Scattered across 4,000 worlds, Yeneth read the reports with a growing sense of horror. The humans had not run. They had not hidden. They had spread themselves across the entire galaxy, embedding themselves so deeply that removing them would require tearing galactic civilization apart. How? His second-in-command whispered, "How is this possible?" Yeneth thought about the question. 40 years. That was when humanity had first made contact with the galaxy. 40 years they had been members of the Assembly, smiling and trading and signing treaties like good little newcomers. 40 years was a long time to plan, they knew, Yeneth said slowly. They knew this day was coming. They have known for decades. That is impossible. The vote was classified at the highest levels. Then they found a way past those levels. They found out, and they prepared. Not for war. For survival. The full scope of what humanity had done began to sink in. This was not an army. This was not a rebellion. This was something far more dangerous. Humans had woven themselves into the fabric of galactic society so thoroughly that cutting them out would cause unimaginable damage, and they had done it without firing a single shot. Yeneth looked at the empty Earth hanging in his viewport. He thought about the 9 billion people who had lived there, each one with families and dreams and fears. He thought about how they must have felt, learning that the entire galaxy wanted them dead. He thought about what he would have done in their place. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are receiving new orders from the Assembly. They want us to begin hunting down the humans who have revealed themselves." Yeneth did not respond immediately. He was still staring at Earth, at the quiet oceans and silent continents. "Sir, your orders?" Yeneth turned away from the viewport. His 4 eyes met those of his officers, each one waiting for him to tell them what to do next. "Begin the hunt," he said quietly. "But understand this. The war we thought we were fighting ended the moment we jumped into this system. Whatever comes next will be something entirely different." He did not say what he was thinking. He did not tell them that for the first time in his long career, he was afraid. Not of human weapons or human fleets. He was afraid of what a species capable of this kind of planning might do next. The truth came out slowly, piece by piece, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. It took the Galactic Intelligence Consortium 3 months to gather enough information to understand what had really happened. When they finally released their report, it shattered everything the galaxy believed about itself. It began with a single man named Gregory Lane. Gregory had been 26 years old when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Assembly. He was a linguist, brilliant with languages and patterns. It's the kind of person who could learn an alien tongue in weeks rather than years. The diplomatic corps recruited him immediately, sending him to work with the Velith as part of a cultural exchange program. He spent 8 years on Velith Prime, learning their ways and earning their trust. He was quiet and helpful, and never asked questions that made anyone uncomfortable. The Velith came to see him as harmless, a useful translator who understood his place in the natural order of things. They were wrong. In 2287, Gregory stumbled across a classified document while helping organize archival records. It was buried deep in files that had not been accessed in centuries, written in an ancient Velith dialect that few beings alive could still read. Gregory read it. He understood it. And what he found changed everything. The document outlined a plan that had been developed over 1,000 years ago. It described the threat that young, aggressive species posed to the established order. It laid out a systematic process for identifying these species early, allowing them to believe they had joined galactic civilization, and then eliminating them before they became too powerful to control. Humanity was not the first species selected for extinction. They were the 47th. Gregory spent 2 more years gathering evidence, copying files, and building a complete picture of what the Velith had done. 46 species had been welcomed into the assembly over the millennia. 46 species had been given hope and friendship and the promise of a future among the stars. 46 species had been wiped out, their worlds sterilized, their histories erased, their names forgotten, and no one had ever known. The other assembly members believed these species had died out naturally, victims of plagues or internal conflicts or simple bad luck. The truth was hidden so deep that only the Velith leadership knew it existed. Gregory knew he would never survive long enough to deliver this information himself. The Velith were already growing suspicious of him. So he did something remarkable. He created a network. Slowly, carefully, he recruited other humans working across the galaxy, sharing fragments of what he had discovered, asking them to prepare for a day that might not come for decades. Then he disappeared, the official record said. Gregory Lane died in a shuttle accident in 2291. His body was never recovered. But before he vanished, he had transmitted everything he knew to a single location, a hidden base that humanity had been building in secret since the first years of contact. The leaders of Earth received his message. They read the Velith document. They understood what it meant, and they began to plan. The infiltration program started small. A few hundred volunteers, carefully selected and trained, were surgically modified to pass as members of other species. Their bones were reshaped. Their skin was altered. Their very biology was changed to match the races they would impersonate. It was painful. Many did not survive the process. Those who did were sent out into the galaxy, armed with false identities and real determination. They were not spies in the traditional sense. They did not steal military secrets or sabotage enemy installations. They did something far more subtle. They became neighbors. They became friends. They became family. A human woman named Claire married a Yethian man and raised children with him, children who were loved by their community and protected by their neighbors. A human man named Daniel became a teacher on the Crothian homeworld, spending 30 years educating young aliens who would remember him fondly for the rest of their lives. A human couple named Sandra and Paul opened a restaurant on Nexus Station that became famous across the sector for its excellent food and warm hospitality. Each of them built connections. Each of them planted seeds, and each of them discovered something that Gregory Lane had only begun to understand. The Velith had not won support for their plans through persuasion or shared values. They had won it through fear. The Karathi had been a peaceful species who had questioned a Melith proposal 2,000 years ago. They had simply asked for more time to consider the matter. A delay of a few months to consult with their population. Their homeworld was now an asteroid field. The Minari had suggested reforms to the assembly voting system 3,000 years before that. Minor reforms, nothing radical, just a proposal to give smaller species a louder voice in certain matters. No one remembered where their homeworld had been. All records had been erased. The message was clear. Vote with the Velith or die. Disagree with the Velith. Your entire species would be forgotten. The human infiltrators learned these stories from the species they lived among. Late at night, in whispered conversations, alien friends shared the fears their governments would never acknowledge publicly. They spoke of relatives who had questioned official policy and disappeared. They spoke of ancient legends about species that had defied the established order and paid the ultimate price. They were afraid. They had been afraid for 12,000 years. The humans listened. They comforted. And they began to offer something that had been missing from the galaxy for millennia. Hope, not loud public hope. Not revolutionary speeches or armed resistance. Just small, quiet moments when a human friend would say something like, "You know, things do not have to be this way forever. Change is always possible." Most aliens dismissed such talk as naive optimism. But some remembered. Some began to wonder, and when the day finally came, when humanity vanished from their homeworlds and reappeared across the galaxy, when 2 billion hidden humans revealed themselves in a single coordinated moment, those who had wondered were ready to listen. The Velith had ruled through fear for 12,000 years. They had made species believe they were alone in their doubts, isolated in their resentment, powerless against the established order. Humanity proved them wrong. The revolution did not start with weapons. It started with a simple truth, spoken aloud for the first time in millennia. You are not alone. You never were. Claire Morrow had lived on Yethys Prime for 38 years. She had arrived as a child, hidden in a refugee transport with forged documents and altered DNA. Her parents had been first-generation infiltrators, volunteers who had given up everything to become something other than human. She barely remembered Earth. Sometimes, in dreams, she saw blue skies and green forests and faces that might have been relatives she would never meet again. But when she woke up, she was Yathian. She spoke their language without accent. She moved her body the way they moved theirs. She thought in their patterns and felt in their rhythms. And yet, she had never forgotten what she really was. Her parents had made sure of that. Every night, in the quiet hours when the household slept, they had whispered stories about humanity, about persistence and creativity and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat, about a species that had crawled out of the mud of a small planet and reached for the stars, despite every obstacle the universe placed in their path. Claire had carried those stories with her through school and university, through her marriage to a kind Yethian man named something her human tongue could never quite pronounce. Through the birth of her two children, who had scales and three hearts, and no idea their mother was not what she appeared to be, she had also carried a mission. For 20 years, Claire had been building a network, not of human agents, though she knew several dozen scattered across Yethian space. Her network was made up of Yethians themselves, people who had confided their doubts to her over drinks, people who had shared stories about relatives who had questioned the assembly and disappeared, people who were tired of living in fear but had no idea what else to do. Claire gave them something to do. She connected them with each other, carefully and slowly, creating bonds between strangers who discovered they were not alone in their discontent. She never pushed too hard. She never suggested anything illegal or dangerous. She simply helped people find each other and let them decide what came next. When the message came that the vote had been cast and humanity was marked for death, Claire felt a strange mix of terror and relief. Terror because her children, her husband, her friends would all be at risk when the truth came out. Relief because the waiting was finally over. The night Patricia Dunn's broadcast reached Yetha's prime, Claire stood in the central marketplace of her city, surrounded by thousands of Yethians going about their daily business. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached up and began peeling away the synthetic skin that covered her face for nearly 4 decades. Gasps spread through the crowd as her true features emerged. Pink skin instead of blue scales, 2 eyes instead of 4. A face that was unmistakably, undeniably human. "My name is Claire Morrow," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I have lived among you for 38 years. Your food has nourished me. Your language has shaped my thoughts. Your kindness has given me a family I love more than my own life." The crowd pressed closer. Claire could not read their expressions. Yethian faces were difficult for her, even after all these years. "I am human," she continued. "The galaxy has declared war on my species. Every government has voted to exterminate us, including yours." Silence. Complete, terrifying silence. An old Yethian woman pushed through the crowd. Her scales had faded to a pale blue-gray with age, and she moved slowly, supported by a cane that clicked against the stone pavement. Claire recognized her. She was a shopkeeper named Maternal Wisdom Flows, grandmother many times over, someone Claire had bought vegetables from every week for 20 years. The old woman stopped in front of Claire. Her 4 eyes examined the revealed human face with an expression that Claire still could not interpret. Then she reached out and took Claire's hand. "Finally," she said, just one word barely above a whisper, but it was enough. The crowd did not attack. They did not call for guards or demand Claire's arrest. Instead, they gathered closer and voices began rising from everywhere at once. "My grandfather told me stories," one young Yethian said, "about a time before the assembly when we made our own choices. I always knew something was wrong," another added. "The way we vote always matches what the Valeth want." Always. How is that possible? I had a cousin who asked questions about the Korathi, an older male said quietly. "He vanished 6 years ago. His family was told he died in an accident." The stories poured out, decades of suppressed doubt and hidden resentment finally finding voice. Claire listened, tears streaming down her exposed human face, as she realized that Gregory Lane had been right all along. The Veleth had not conquered the galaxy through strength or wisdom. They had conquered it through isolation. They had made every species believe they were alone in their fear. But they were not alone. They never had been. Word spread from the marketplace to the surrounding districts. From the city to the continent, from Yethis Prime to the Yethian colonies, scattered across a dozen star systems. Humans revealed themselves, and instead of being killed, they were protected. Hidden in homes and businesses and government offices by aliens who had finally found the courage to resist. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Not everywhere and not without violence. On some worlds, humans were captured and executed before they could speak. On others, brutal crackdowns began immediately, with security forces hunting down anyone suspected of harboring human sympathies. But on enough worlds, in enough places, the resistance took hold. The Velith responded with fury. Fleets were dispatched to rebellious systems. Ultimatums were issued. Examples were made of planets that refused to comply with extermination orders, but for every world they punished, 3 more joined the resistance. For every human they killed, 10,000 aliens decided they had lived in fear long enough. Claire watched the reports come in from across the galaxy, tracking the spreading chaos on hidden communication networks. Her husband stood beside her, his scaled hand holding hers. His children asking questions about their mother's true nature that she answered as honestly as she could. "Will we win?" her daughter asked. She was 12 years old, caught between 2 worlds she did not fully understand. Claire looked at her child. This beautiful mix of human determination and Yethian grace, and told her the truth. "I do not know, but I know this. For 12,000 years, the galaxy has lived in fear. Whatever happens next, that fear is broken. The Velith cannot put it back together. And that means we have already won something that matters." She pulled her daughter close, holding her tight as the galaxy burned and reformed around them. "We have won the chance to try." The war lasted 3 years. Not a war of fleets and armies, though there was plenty of that. It was a war of ideas, fought in council chambers and living rooms and marketplaces and military bases. Wherever beings gathered to decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in, the Velith fought hard. They had 12,000 years of accumulated power, vast resources, and the habit of obedience that came from generations of unopposed rule. They destroyed rebellious worlds. They executed traitors. They did everything they had always done when species threatened their dominance. But the old methods no longer worked. Too many secrets had been revealed. Too many lies had been exposed. When the Velith destroyed a world, it did not inspire fear anymore. It inspired rage. Every act of brutality pushed more species into the resistance. Every atrocity proved that humans had been telling the truth. Kevin Holloway watched it all from a hidden base deep in unexplored space. The same base that Gregory Lane had transmitted his secrets to 40 years earlier. 9 billion humans had gathered here, living in vast underground cities carved from asteroids and moons, waiting for the moment when they could return to a galaxy that no longer wanted them dead. Kevin was 60 years old now. His hair had gone completely white, and he walked with a cane from an injury he had taken during the evacuation of Earth. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. He did not feel lucky. He felt tired in a way that sleep could not cure. But he also felt something else. Hope. Small and fragile, but growing stronger every day. The end came not with a great battle, but with a quiet meeting on a station orbiting a dying star. Representatives from 43 species gathered in a conference room designed for 12. Crowding together in a space that smelled of recycled air and nervous sweat, Kevin sat at the head of the table, representing humanity. Across from him sat the Velith High Speaker, the same crystalline being who had announced the vote for human extinction 3 years earlier. Its body was cracked now, its light dimmer than before. The war had taken its toll on everyone. "You cannot win this," the Velith said. Its voice had lost none of its cold clarity, but there was something beneath the surface now. Something that might have been fear. "We have ruled for 12,000 years. We will rule for 12,000 more." Kevin shook his head slowly. "No, you ruled because everyone was afraid to stand alone. You ruled because species believed they would be destroyed if they questioned you. That belief is gone now. You cannot bring it back. Fear is eternal. Give us time, and we will restore order, perhaps. But you will not have time. The galaxy has seen what you really are. They have seen what we are too, and they have made their choice." The vote was called. Not a vote for war or peace, but something more fundamental. A vote to dissolve the old Galactic Assembly entirely and create something new. Something built on consent rather than coercion. Something that gave every species, no matter how small or young, a genuine voice in their own future. Representatives spoke in turn, some arguing for the old ways, most arguing for change. Kevin listened without speaking, letting the galaxy debate its own destiny. This was not a moment for humans to lead. It was a moment for humans to stand alongside their friends, and let the natural desire for freedom find its voice. When the final tally came, it was not unanimous. 312 species voted for dissolution. 87 voted against. 18 abstained, uncertain which future they preferred. But it was enough. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Assembly had voted against the wishes of the Velith. For the first time in living memory, species had spoken their true minds without fear of punishment. The Velith High Speaker stared at the numbers for a long moment. Its crystalline form flickered, light scattering in patterns that Kevin could not interpret. "This is not how the galaxy works," it said finally. "It is now," Kevin replied. He looked around the crowded room, at representatives from dozens of species who had risked everything to be here. Yathians and Crothians and Minari and 100 others, each one carrying the hopes of billions. "You can be part of it," Kevin said to the Velith. "Everyone can. That was always the point. We did not come to destroy you. We came to survive. And survival means building something together that works for everyone, not just the powerful." He extended his hand across the table. It was a human gesture, one that most species in the room did not understand. But the meaning was clear enough. The Velith looked at his hand. Seconds passed. Then, slowly, it reached out with a crystalline appendage and touched Kevin's fingers. "We do not know how to live in a galaxy where we do not rule," it admitted. The words seemed to cause it physical pain. "Neither do we," Kevin said. "Neither does anyone. That is what makes it worth trying." Outside the viewport, the dying star pulsed with fading light. In conference rooms and living rooms across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the broadcast and waited to learn what would happen next. Kevin Holloway thought about Gregory Lane. Dead for 50 years, who had started everything with a single act of courage. He thought about Patricia Dunn, who had faced down 2 million warships with nothing but a smile and a message. He thought about Claire Morrow and the countless others who had given up their identities, their homes, their very faces to plant seeds of hope across the stars. He thought about humanity. A small species on a small planet facing extinction by unanimous vote. They had not responded with weapons or fury. They had responded with patience and connection and the stubborn belief that people were capable of being better than their fears. And they had been right. The new Galactic Assembly would not be perfect. There would be conflicts and compromises and disappointments. Some species would refuse to participate. Some wounds would take generations to heal. The Velith would struggle to accept their reduced role. Humanity would struggle with the responsibility of having changed everything. But for the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy was breathing freely. The fear that had choked it for so long was loosening its grip. Species were talking to each other honestly, not performing scripts written by their masters. It was a beginning. Only a beginning. But beginnings mattered. Kevin looked out at the dying star and smiled. Somewhere out there, 9 billion humans were waiting to come home. Somewhere out there, trillions of aliens were discovering what it felt like to hope. The vote had been unanimous once. Every species in the galaxy had chosen to destroy humanity, but humanity had taught them to choose again, and this time they had chosen differently.